The decommission notice came through on a maintenance cycle, the way they all do, flagged amber in the routing table, assigned a ticket number, attached to a work order that nobody had read in 11 months. Waypoint Kessara Relay Node 7. Scheduled for shutdown as of cycle 4401. Traffic to be mirrored per the standard handoff protocol until a replacement uplink came online. I filed the ticket. I marked the field complete. I moved on to the next item in the queue. I did not read the handoff protocol. I want to be precise about that. I am the Senior Operations Watch Officer at Waypoint Kessara. I have held that posting for 9 years. I know every system on this station, and I did not read the handoff protocol attached to a decommission notice for a relay node because nobody reads those. They are 46 pages of routing specifications and legacy infrastructure clauses written by engineers who retired before I was assigned here, ratified by a treaty subcommittee that met twice and never convened again, and stamped with the seal of an oversight body that has since been folded into 3 different successor agencies. Nobody reads them. Nobody has ever needed to read them. The nodes come down, the nodes come back up, the traffic reroutes, and the sector keeps humming. I understand that now. I did not understand it on the morning. The cruiser Veth Amara went dark in the Kessara debris field. She came in on an approach vector that made no sense to me when I first saw it on the scope, too steep, too fast, decelerating hard against a debris lane that the nav charts flagged as moderate hazard. I logged the contact, pulled her transponder, got the sovereignty registry confirmation back in 4 seconds. Heavy cruiser. Crew complement of 212. She was on a survey transit, according to the filed route plan, and her deceleration burn was already at 140% of rated output. I opened a channel. She came back garbled. Not comm interference. I know what that sounds like, and this was not it. Her signal was intact. Her transmitter was intact. What was garbled was her crew, because someone on that bridge was talking at the same time as someone else on that bridge, and at least one of those people was scared in the way that trained officers become scared, which is loudly and with a great deal of very specific profanity about specific systems that are failing in specific ways. I caught the words coolant pressure and lateral impact, and then the channel dropped entirely. I had her on visual 30 seconds later. She had clipped the edge of the debris lane. Not a direct collision. She had not hit anything large, but she had crossed into a band of high-density fragment scatter at 600 meters per second and taken what the damage assessment algorithms later called a sustained percussive event across her port ventral plating, which is a very clean way of saying that approximately 400 kilograms of rock and ice and ancient orbital debris had struck her hull in the span of 11 seconds, and that her port ventral plating was no longer a plating so much as a memory. She was venting. I could see it on the scope, a pale bloom of gas and particulate spreading out from her lower hull, catching the light of Kessara's primary star the way exhaled breath catches cold air. I opened the emergency channel and got nothing. I tried the Sovereignty Fleet relay at Sector Control and got a 15-minute queuing delay because Sector Control was handling a fuel depot incident in the outer belt, and their emergency traffic was backed up. I tried the direct uplink to the Sovereignty Capital network and got a routing error. Node 7. It had been dark for 11 months. I stared at that routing error for 3 full seconds before I understood what it meant, and then I pulled up the decommission notice, and then I pulled up the handoff protocol, and then I began reading 46 pages of legacy infrastructure clauses very quickly indeed. The handoff protocol was titled, in the dry language of its era, the Waypoint Kessara Relay Infrastructure Continuity Agreement, Revision 4, appended as Exhibit C to the Sovereignty Terran Deepwatch Network Interoperability Memorandum, dated approximately 230 years prior to the morning I was reading it. I had never heard of the Sovereignty Terran Deepwatch Network Interoperability Memorandum. I do not believe anyone on this station had heard of it. It was, as best I could determine in the time I had available, which was not much time. A document produced during a period when the sovereignty and the human-Terran administration were engaged in what the preamble called a cooperative infrastructure development initiative, which from context appeared to mean that the humans had offered to let the sovereignty use portions of their deep space relay network in exchange for certain navigation easements in the Kessara corridor. And the sovereignty had agreed, and both parties had signed, and then the humans had built their network, and the sovereignty had used the easements, and the whole arrangement had worked quietly and without incident for 2 centuries, until the moment I needed it to do something specific. Specifically, the decommission handoff protocol for Node 7 specified that all undelivered emergency traffic would be automatically mirrored to the nearest active relay in the partner network. The nearest active relay in the partner network was Earth's Deepwatch grid, listening post Aurum 9, at a distance of approximately 4 light hours. My distress burst to sector control had not reached sector control. It had reached Aurum 9. I sat with this information for a moment. On the visual scope, the Vethamara was still venting. Her approach had stabilized. She was not going to hit anything else, but she was holding position in the debris field, and she was doing it on emergency thrusters, which told me her main drive was offline, which told me her power situation was not good. 212 crew. Life support on a sovereignty heavy cruiser in main drive offline emergency mode would hold for somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, depending on the state of the reserve cells. The sovereignty fleet was 6 hours away if they were already moving, which they were not, because sector control did not know about this yet. I tried sector control again. 12-minute queuing delay now. The fuel depot incident was apparently ongoing. I looked at my board. I had one functional uplink. It went to a human listening post 4 light hours away that had received my distress burst 11 months ago by accident of decommissioning protocol, and that I had, until 30 seconds ago, never known existed. I sent a follow-up burst. I included the Vethamara's registry data, her last confirmed position, her confirmed damage status, her crew complement, and the 6-hour ETA of the nearest sovereignty response asset. I also included the routing error notification, because it seemed relevant to document that I knew the message had gone to the wrong place, even if the wrong place was the only place currently receiving. Then I called my commanding officer. Commander Rhett Vasa had held the Kessara posting for 16 years, and had the particular exhausted serenity of someone who had encountered most categories of operational malfunction, and had stopped being surprised by any of them. She arrived on the watch floor in her duty uniform, took one look at the scope, asked 2 questions, crew count, life support window, and then stood quietly while I explained about Node 7 and the handoff protocol and the Sovereignty Terran Deepwatch Network Interoperability Memorandum. She was quiet for a while after that. "You sent a distress burst to Earth," she said. "I sent a distress burst to sector control. The burst was automatically mirrored to Earth by an infrastructure agreement I was not aware of. But Earth received it. Earth received it, yes. And Earth has not responded. It has been 4 minutes since I sent the follow-up burst. Earth is 4 light hours away. A response, if one is sent at all, will take 4 hours to arrive." She was quiet again. On the scope, the Vethamara had stopped venting. That was either because they had sealed the breach or because there was nothing left to vent from that section of hull, and I did not know which. I pulled up the spectrographic reading from the scope's passive sensor array and tried to determine which it was, and the answer came back ambiguous. The gas concentration at the breach site was decreasing, but the rate of decrease matched both a successful seal and a hull section that had vented to equilibrium with the surrounding vacuum. I tried to raise the Vethamara on the emergency frequency again. This time I got through. The voice that answered was not the bridge crew I had been trying to reach. It was a damage control officer working from a secondary station 2 decks below the bridge, and she spoke in the compressed, rapid cadence of someone who was managing a checklist while talking. She confirmed the breach was partially sealed. 2 of the 3 emergency bulkheads had engaged. The third had failed to cycle, and they were working on it manually. And that main power was down, but reserve cells were holding. She did not know the status of the bridge. Communications with the bridge were intermittent. She had 17 injured personnel in her section, and 2 were in critical condition. "How many total casualties do you know about?" I asked. 17 confirmed in my section, she said. "I have reports from 2 other sections, 6 more casualties, 2 critical. Bridge status unknown. I'm running this on a portable comm unit." "Keep this channel open," I said. "I'm trying to get you help." She acknowledged and returned to her checklist. I could hear her in the background, directing her crew with the same compressed efficiency, and I understood from listening to her that this was a person who was going to do everything that could be done with what she had, for as long as she had it, and that what she had was running out. I wrote all of this in the incident log, and then went back to reading the handoff protocol. She was quiet again. On the scope, the Kessara had stopped venting. That was either because they had sealed the breach or because there was nothing left to vent from that section of hull, and I did not know which. "Get sector control," Vasa said. "I am in queue. Estimated wait is currently 11 minutes. Tell them it is an emergency. I have flagged the transmission as priority 1. They are handling a fuel depot incident." Vasa looked at the scope. 212 crew, 8 to 12 hours of life support. The math was not difficult. "Keep trying," she said. I kept trying. The next 40 minutes were the kind of time that is very full and also very empty, because I was doing everything I could do, and none of it was the thing that needed doing. I worked the queue at sector control. I ran damage assessment on the Kessara from my passive sensors. I relayed what information I could from the damage control officer's updates to the working incident log, building a picture of the situation aboard the cruiser that grew steadily more detailed and no less grim. The third emergency bulkhead never cycled. The damage control officer's crew got it closed manually, working in decompression suits in a corridor that was losing pressure the entire time. It took them 22 minutes. When it was done, her voice on the channel had a quality to it that I recognized from operational briefings about high-stress environments. The particular flatness of someone who has been running at their maximum capacity for a sustained period and has decided, consciously or otherwise, to stop spending energy on anything that is not immediately necessary. "Bulkhead secured," she said. "Hull pressure stabilizing." "Copy," I said. "Good work." She did not respond to that, because it was not information she needed. Bridge contact was restored at the 38-minute mark. The Kessara's first officer, her commanding officer, had been injured in the initial impact, confirmed the situation. Main drive offline, emergency power stable but degrading, 17 serious casualties including 4 in critical condition now in the medical bay, structural integrity compromised on the port ventral section, and navigation control available but limited to emergency thrusters. They were not going anywhere until someone came to them. I gave her sector control's estimated ETA, still working from the fleet's standard 6-hour response time, because sector control still had not cleared the fuel depot queue, and she received this information in the same flat register as the damage control officer below her. She did not say anything about the timeline. She thanked me and went back to her vessel. I looked at the follow-up burst I had sent to Orem 9, sitting in the outbox with its delivery confirmation timestamp, and calculated again how long it would take for a response to arrive if Earth sent one. 3 hours and 42 minutes remaining. I kept working the queue. The Sovereignty fleet began moving 3 hours and 40 minutes after the incident, which was when sector control finally cleared its queue, and received my priority 1 flag, and dispatched a response coordinator who called me directly, and then escalated to Commander Retvasa, and then escalated again to Fleet Operations. By that point, the Vethamara had managed to restore partial main power. They had 1 engineer left in the drive section who knew what she was doing, and she had been doing it by hand in a compartment that was being held at pressure by 2 emergency bulkheads, and what one of the rescue coordinators later described as an unreasonable amount of determination, and life support was stable at reduced capacity. 6 hours. The fleet would arrive in 6 hours. 4 hours and 12 minutes after I sent the follow-up burst, I received a response from Earth's Deepwatch grid, listening post Aurum 9. It was brief. It read, Deepwatch Aurum 9 acknowledges receipt of emergency traffic forwarded under Kessara handoff protocol. Distress incident confirmed. Routing inquiry noted. Response assets have already departed. ETA to Kessara debris field, 3 hours, 50 minutes. Please confirm your preferred approach corridor and advise on any secondary hazards in the debris lane. Also advise whether the stricken vessel has any specific medical requirements. We are bringing a full trauma suite. I read it twice. Then I read the relevant sentence again. Response assets have already departed. I checked the timestamp on my original distress burst, the one that had been sent to Sector Control 11 months ago, and had been sitting in a forwarding queue this entire time. And then I checked the timestamp on the response from Aurum 9, and I did the arithmetic, and I determined that Earth's Deepwatch grid had received my burst, identified it as an active emergency, and dispatched response assets in under 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I sat with that number for a moment. I thought about the 15-minute queue at Sector Control, the 11-month gap between the decommission, notice, and anyone reading the handoff protocol, the 42 minutes it had taken the damage control officer's crew to manually close a bulkhead that was supposed to cycle automatically. 3 minutes was a different kind of number than all of those. 3 minutes was a number that meant someone somewhere had been expecting this call. I went to find Commander Retvasa. She was in her office working through the coordination calls with Sector Control and the Fleet Operations Center, and she had the expression of someone managing 3 urgent conversations at once while also privately calculating whether the next 6 hours were going to end in the way that everyone present was working hard to prevent. I waited in the doorway until she saw me. She held up a hand 1 moment and finished her current exchange. What is it? Earth responded. She put down the datapad. When? 4 hours and 12 minutes after I sent the burst, which means they responded approximately 9 minutes after they received it. But the critical information is the first line of their message. Response assets have already departed. She looked at me. They did not wait for my follow-up, I said. They received the original distress burst, the one that was mirrored automatically by the handoff protocol, and they dispatched assets before I even knew the message had gone to them, before I knew Aurum 9 existed. How long ago did they depart? Based on the message timestamp and the 4-hour transit time, they departed approximately 12 minutes after receiving my original burst. I paused. My original burst included nothing except the emergency classification, the waypoint identifier, and the Vethamara's transponder data. That was all the mirrored traffic contained. They acted on a transponder number and an emergency flag. Retvasa stood up. How many ships? She asked. They did not specify in the initial response. They mentioned a full trauma suite. Did they acknowledge that the message was a routing error? They acknowledged that they received it via the Kessara handoff protocol. They did not treat it as a basis for declining to respond. Another silence. The fleet ETA is 6 hours, she said. Yes. Earth ETA is 2 hours and 22 minutes. Yes. She picked up the datapad again and stared at it for a moment without reading it. Then she set it back down. Get me the approach corridor specifications and find out what the Vethamara's medical situation looks like. If Earth is bringing a trauma suite, I want to know what we need before they arrive. Yes, Commander. And Vensareth. I stopped. Find me a copy of that interoperability memorandum, she said. The whole thing. I want to know what else is in it. The Vethamara's medical situation was worse than I had expected and better than I had feared, which is a description that covers a wide range of outcomes, and in this case covered the following specific facts. 17 crew members were in serious condition, of whom 4 were in critical condition, all of them in the cruiser's medical bay, which was at this point running on emergency power, and being operated by 2 medical officers and 3 orderlies who had not slept in 8 hours. 41 crew members had injuries that had been treated and stabilized. The remaining 154 were uninjured or had minor injuries. The drive engineer who had restored partial power was being given a sedative by one of the orderlies because she had refused to leave the drive section until physically carried out, and the orderly had decided this counted as a medical situation. I sent this information to Orem 9. The response came back 47 minutes later, which was 8 minutes faster than the lightspeed round trip allowed for, which meant they had received my transmission and responded before my transmission was technically finished arriving, which I later learned was because Deepwatch relay posts used a predictive burst technique for emergency traffic that sent the reply before the full incoming message was decoded. A human engineering decision. Practical. Their response read, understood, deploying medical lead to coordinate on approach. Trauma suite is equipped for the injury profile you described. We are also bringing structural assessment and emergency repair capability. Advise whether the vessel's drive section is accessible for external crew or if internal access only. We have 3 vessels, Deepwatch Tender Meridian, Repair Ship Holdfast, and Escort Frigate Constance. Constance carries the medical team as well as the trauma suite. Expect us on your scope inside 90 minutes. I read this to Commander Rhett Vasa. She was quiet for a moment after the part about 3 vessels. A tender, a repair ship, and a frigate, she said. Yes. They sent a repair ship. Yes. For a distress call they received by accident through a 200-year-old infrastructure agreement. That is correct. She looked at the scope. The Vethamara was holding steady. 2 of the critical cases had stabilized according to the last update from their medical bay. 2 had not. How long until they're on scope? Approximately 80 minutes at current approach speed. Have you reached anyone in the Sovereignty Foreign Affairs Office? I have sent a notification to the protocol desk. I have not received a response. Rhett Vasa made a sound that I can only describe as the sound a person makes when they have accepted that a situation has moved beyond the set of situations they were trained to manage, and they are now simply going to manage it anyway. All right, she said. When they come on scope, you will hail them, you will thank them, and you will do exactly what they ask regarding approach corridors. Do not make this complicated. Understood. And Vensareth, what did you find in the memorandum? I had been hoping she would forget to ask. The interoperability agreement, I said carefully, contains 17 operational clauses. I have read all 17. Clause 4 is the handoff protocol we have already discussed. Clause 9 establishes a mutual notification requirement for any response action taken under Clause 4, meaning that when Earth dispatched assets, they were technically required to notify our Foreign Affairs Office, which is presumably why they are asking about approach corridors rather than simply arriving. And the other 15 clauses. Clause 12, I said, establishes a standing mutual aid commitment for any emergency in the Kessara corridor that is flagged under the Priority 1 designation. Rhett Vasa looked at me. Standing, I said. Not advisory, not optional, standing. The Sovereignty signed it. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the ones before it. This was the silence of someone working through implications. Does Fleet Operations know about Clause 12? She asked. I would estimate no, I said, given that their response to the routing error was to ask me what I planned to do about it rather than to immediately dispatch assets themselves. Does anyone in the sovereignty government know about Clause 12? I have not found any record of Clause 12 being invoked, referenced, or discussed in any document I have access to in the station archive. The memorandum was signed 230 years ago. The officials who signed it are long dead. I do not believe anyone on our side of this agreement has thought about it since the initial ratification. Another silence. Earth knows about it, Retvasa said. Earth dispatched assets in 9 minutes, I said. Yes, I believe Earth knows about it. They came on scope at the 83-minute mark, which was 7 minutes later than their estimate, and which their communications officer explained was due to having taken a slightly wider arc around the debris field to avoid a fragment cluster that the Vethemara's navigation data, which they had apparently accessed from the registry information I sent in my initial burst, had flagged as high density. They had read the navigation data from my initial burst and used it to plot a safer approach. 3 contacts on scope. The tender Meridian was the largest, a wide, flat-shouldered vessel with the profile of something built to carry and deploy rather than to fight, her running lights set in the Terran emergency configuration, amber and white. The holdfast was narrower, angular at the bow, with external equipment housings along her flanks that I could not immediately identify at range. The Constance was smaller than both, and she moved differently, not aggressively, not threateningly, but with the particular economy of a ship that has been designed to go exactly where it intends to go and to do so efficiently, hull weathered in the way that working military vessels become weathered after years of actual use. I hailed them on the channel they had specified. The voice that answered was calm and professional and spoke in sovereignty standard with an accent I did not recognize, a slight formality in the consonants, a particular rhythm to the sentence construction that was fluent but not native. Waypoint Kessara, this is Deepwatch Tender Meridian. We have the Vethemara on our scope. We are ready to begin approach on your guidance. Go ahead with corridor recommendations. I gave them the corridor. They acknowledged, and the 3 ships adjusted course in a smooth, coordinated way that suggested they had done this before. I opened a second channel to the Vethemara and told them what was coming. There was a pause on that end. Then the Vethemara's first officer said, "Say again, Kessara, did you say Terran vessels?" 3 Deepwatch assets, I said. Tender, repair ship and escort frigate. They have a full trauma suite. They are 4 minutes out. Another pause, longer this time. We did not contact Earth, she said. I am aware, I said. It is complicated. Please have your medical officer contact Constance on frequency Orem 7. They would like to coordinate the trauma team transfer. A third pause. Then, copy Kessara, connecting now. Her voice had the quality of someone who has just added a very large and unexpected item to a list they were already managing and has decided that it will have to go at the bottom for now. I understood the feeling. The Constance docked with the Vethemara first. She did it without fanfare, matched velocity, approached along the pre-agreed corridor, extended a pressurized docking collar to the Vethemara's emergency port, and within 6 minutes of contact, had a medical team and equipment aboard the stricken cruiser. I know the 6 minutes because I was watching the clock. The holdfast moved to the Vethemara's port ventral section, the breach, and the equipment housings I had not been able to identify at range turned out to be external repair cradles carrying hull patching systems and structural survey drones. The drones were deployed before the holdfast had even achieved final position. They moved through the debris field around the breach section with the practiced ease of tools that had been designed specifically for this, mapping the damage in real time, feeding the data back to the holdfast's repair team. I watched the drone telemetry appear on the shared channel the holdfast had opened for my benefit. Hull breach, 17 meters across at the widest point, irregular, 3 secondary fractures extending from the main break, 2 of them reaching toward structural members that the holdfast assessment software was flagging in amber. Internal compartments sealed correctly behind the breach, pressurization holding on the other side of the bulkheads. The drone count climbed as the holdfast deployed them in sequence. 4, then 8, then a dozen, each one working a different section of the damaged area, and within 20 minutes they had a full structural map that was more detailed than anything my passive sensors had produced in 3 hours of looking at the same hull. I had been running my passive sensors on the Kessara since the moment she clipped the debris lane. I had the best sensor suite on this waypoint. It was old hardware but maintained, and I knew how to work it. I had been building my own damage picture for hours, and in 20 minutes, the holdfast drones had made my 3-hour picture look like a sketch. It was not that my equipment was bad. It was that their equipment had been built for this specific task, by people who had thought carefully about what this specific task required, and had then given those people the resources to build it properly. The drones moved with deliberate efficiency through the debris scatter around the breach, not fast but coordinated, each one sweep calibrated to the others so they were never duplicating coverage, always working outward from the breach boundary in an expanding assessment shell. When one of them flagged an anomaly, a surface discoloration that might have been stress fracturing or might have been a material inconsistency in the original plating, 2 others immediately diverted to cross-check it. The anomaly turned out to be a material inconsistency. They logged it and moved on without waiting for instruction. I watched this and thought about the decommission notice for Node 7, sitting in the maintenance queue for 11 months. The holdfast's team lead opened a channel to me. "Watch officer, this is holdfast repair control. We have a full damage assessment. 17-meter primary breach, 3 secondary fractures, 2 of which are within 2 meters of load-bearing structural members. Recommend we seal the secondaries first before the primary patch. If the hull flexes under patch application without the secondary fractures secured, we could propagate the damage. Estimated total repair time for a transit-rated patch, 4 hours and 20 minutes. Understood, I said. Proceed as you see fit. One more item, she said. The port ventral section has 3 equipment bays that are currently exposed to vacuum. 2 of them appear to be empty. One of them contains what our sensors are reading as active power cell storage. Recommend confirming with the Kessara crew before we work anywhere near that bay. I relayed this to the Kessara's first officer. She confirmed the bay contents and gave clearance parameters. I passed them back to holdfast repair control. The whole exchange took 4 minutes, and by the end of it, the holdfast team was already moving into position on the secondary fractures. I thought about sector control, still working through the fuel depot incident. The Meridian stood off at a safe distance and made herself available. She was talking constantly on frequencies I was only partially tracking, coordinating with the Constance's medical team and the holdfast repair crew, and occasionally with me when I had information they needed. At one point, she hailed me to ask for the Kessara's reserve cell capacity readings, because her systems had picked up a fluctuation in the power signature that they wanted to cross-reference. I pulled the readings and sent them. The fluctuation, it turned out, was the drive engineer's repair work having an effect on the reserve cell draw. She was bringing systems back online incrementally, and each restored system was drawing slightly more than the emergency reserve had been budgeted to supply, and Meridian's monitoring was precise enough to catch that at range. They were watching everything. The 4 critical cases. That was what I was watching on the scope, and listening for in the cross-traffic on the medical frequency. The Kessara's medical officers had given Constance's trauma team a full handover brief before they were even through the docking collar. I could hear it in fragments on the channel, the particular compressed precision of medical personnel transferring care responsibility, every word carrying weight because weight was what the situation required. The Constance's lead surgeon came on my frequency 40 minutes after docking. She introduced herself briefly. Her name was a human name that I am going to render phonetically as something close to Sira Ondath, though the vowels in the original were not quite right for sovereignty standard. And she asked me 3 questions about the Veth Amara's medical bay environmental conditions, the crew's physiological baseline data, and whether I had any information about the circumstances of the critical cases before the medical officers arrived at the scene. I answered what I could from the incident log. She thanked me, asked me to log her direct frequency as a secondary contact for the remainder of the operation, and went back to work. I watched the medical channel's traffic volume over the next 2 hours. It was steady and dense, the kind of sustained activity level that I had seen before only in emergency drills, and even then only in the high-intensity scenarios. 4 critical patients, 17 serious, 2 medical officers from the Veth Amara working alongside a Terran trauma team aboard a cruiser that was running on emergency power in the middle of a debris field. The communications between them were efficient and specific and almost entirely technical, and I could follow most of it. And what I followed was not reassuring in the way that reassuring would mean. There was nothing to worry about, but was reassuring in the way that meant trained people were doing what trained people do. 41 minutes after Constance docked, I received a message from the Veth Amara's senior medical officer. 3 of the 4 critical cases had been stabilized. The 4th was in surgery. I wrote this in the incident log, and then sat very still for a moment. Commander Retvasa came to the watch floor at the 2-hour mark and stood next to my station and watched the scope without speaking for a while. The holdfast was still working on the hull. The Constance was still docked. The Meridian was standing off, steady, unhurried. "Any word from the Foreign Affairs Office?" I asked. "They sent a protocol officer," she said. "He is on his way. He will arrive in approximately 9 hours. That is after the Sovereignty fleet arrives." "Yes. And Earth will probably be gone by then." "Probably." She watched the scope. The Fleet Operations Center called again. They wanted to know why there were unidentified Terran vessels at the Veth Amara's position. "What did you tell them?" "I told them there was an active mutual aid obligation under the Kessara Interoperability Memorandum, and that Earth was fulfilling it. I sent them a copy of the document." She paused. There was a silence on the line after that. "How long a silence?" "Long enough that I thought the connection had dropped." She looked at me. "They are reviewing it. The ambassador to the Terran administration has been notified. The Oversight Committee for Legacy Treaty Instruments has been convened on an emergency basis." "That is a committee I did not know existed." "I did not know it existed either," she said. "Apparently it exists specifically for situations like this. It meets rarely." I thought about that. A committee that existed to handle the moments when 200-year-old agreements suddenly became relevant again. Someone, somewhere in the sovereignty bureaucratic structure, had anticipated that this could happen. They had created an apparatus for it. They had simply not told anyone at the operational level that the apparatus existed. Which was, I supposed, consistent with how the rest of this morning had gone. "The 4th case," Retvasa said. It was not a question, but it was asking something. "Still in surgery as of the last update, 40 minutes ago." She nodded, kept watching the scope. "The surgery took 3 hours and 11 minutes. I know this because I was watching the clock, and because I asked the medical frequency for updates twice, and because when the update came through, it came from Sira Ondath directly and not through the relay I had been using. Which meant she had taken the time to find the right channel and call me herself. "Patient is stable," she said. "We will maintain monitoring for the next several hours, but the immediate danger has passed. Your medical team did very good work under difficult conditions." I thanked her. She said, in the matter-of-fact way of someone reporting a fact, You should also know that 2 of the cases we flagged as serious have been cleared for normal care. The other 15 are stable and improving. I'll send a full status report through to your log." "Thank you," I said again. This was becoming repetitive, but I did not have a better word. "One more thing," she said. "Your repair team is going to want to look at the secondary power routing through the port midsection when the hull work is done. The holdfast crew found a stress fracture in the secondary conduit housing that isn't in the damage report. It's not dangerous right now, but it will be if it's ignored. I'll pass that along." "Good." A pause. "Sorry we took so long getting here." I looked at my board. 3 hours and 57 minutes from their message to their arrival. 83 minutes on scope before first docking. I thought about the Sovereignty fleet, currently 4 hours out and counting. "You were not slow," I said. "We were 7 minutes behind schedule." "You were fast enough," I said. She seemed to accept this. The channel closed. The holdfast's repair team worked for another 4 hours on the hull breach. What they produced at the end of those 4 hours was not beautiful. It was a patch job, explicitly, and the holdfast's team lead told me so directly in the technical handover brief she gave at the conclusion. This would hold for transit to a proper repair facility. It was rated for standard jump stress, and the Kessara should not attempt any high-G maneuvers or combat operations until the port ventral section was replaced at a yard. The patch itself was a layered composite assembly. 4 structural panels bonded across the primary breach, with a flexible sealing membrane underneath that would flex with hull movement rather than crack. And over the top of that, a reinforcement lattice anchored to the Kessara's intact framing at 12 contact points, each one checked manually by a holdfast crew member working in a full-pressure suit in the vacuum outside the hull. The secondary fractures had been sealed with a penetrating consolidant that the holdfast's team lead described as something they had developed for exactly this kind of job: high fragmentation percussive damage to light alloy plating. And she said it with the mild pride of someone who has useful specialized knowledge and is occasionally given the opportunity to use it. She provided a detailed structural assessment report, a list of recommended repair actions in order of priority, and 3 alternative routing options for the Kessara's transit to the nearest Sovereignty repair facility, annotated with the navigational hazards along each route. She gave this to me because I was the watch officer at Kessara, and she wanted it on record at the Waypoint log, and she wanted Sovereignty fleet operations to have it when they arrived. "Do you want me to transmit this to fleet operations directly?" I asked. She thought about it for a moment. "It might be better coming from you," she said. "We're not sure who has been briefed on the situation at their end, and we don't want to cause any confusion." This was, I thought, an extremely diplomatic way of acknowledging that a Sovereignty fleet arriving to find Terran repair ships already at work on one of their vessels might have questions that would take time to answer, and that having those questions answered by me rather than by Earth would probably smooth the interaction. "I'll handle it," I said. "Thank you, Kessara." She paused. "You run a good watch post." I had no particular response to that, so I said thank you again and filed the report. The Constance undocked from the Kessara 1 hour before the Sovereignty fleet arrived. The holdfast had finished her hull work 90 minutes earlier. The Meridian had been standing off the entire time, making herself available, unhurried, and she was still there when the Constance sealed her docking collar and backed carefully away from the stricken cruiser. I watched them form up. Constance, then Holdfast, then Meridian behind them. 3 ships settling into a loose departure formation, running lights still in the amber and white emergency configuration. I had been watching them for hours at this point, had been tracking their approach vectors and their working positions and their occasional communications with such focus that they had become, in some practical sense, part of my scope, and watching them pull away was a different thing than I had expected it to be. I hailed Meridian, because she was the lead vessel in the formation and that seemed right. Deepwatch Meridian Kessara. The Sovereignty Fleet is 62 minutes out. Are you departing? The voice that answered was different from the communications officer I had been working with, deeper, quieter, with the particular economy of someone who was used to speaking on command channels and didn't waste words. Kessara, Meridian Actual. We're departing, yes. The Vethamara is stable, and the fleet will be better positioned to handle the final transit and recovery. We don't want to be in anyone's way. Understood. I looked at my board. The Vethamara's commanding officer asked me to convey his thanks. Noted. Please tell him his crew performed exceptionally, especially the engineer and the drive section. I'll pass that along. A pause. Kessara, I want to note for your log that we're satisfied the mutual aid obligation under the interoperability memorandum has been fulfilled. The incident will be documented on our end as a Clause 12 response. You may want to have your treaty people review the full document. There are a few other clauses that haven't been tested yet. I looked at Commander Rhett Vasa, who had come back to the watch floor sometime in the last hour and was standing at the edge of my station. I'll make sure that recommendation reaches the appropriate office, I said. Good. Meridian out. I watched them go. The three ships moved through the debris field on the corridor I had cleared for them, steady and unhurried, and within 20 minutes they had crossed the edge of my reliable scope range and were tracks on a plot rather than contacts, and then they were gone. The Sovereignty Fleet arrived 59 minutes later. I gave them the full briefing: the incident, the routing error, the handoff protocol, the Deepwatch response, the holdfast's repair assessment, the medical status of the Vethamara's crew, the secondary power conduit issue. I transmitted all documentation. I answered questions for 41 minutes. The fleet admiral, a rear admiral named Thesson, who I had never met and who had the manner of someone who had been briefed on the situation in transit and was still processing it, asked me at one point to confirm, again, whether I had actively routed the distress burst to Earth. No, I said for the third time. The burst was routed to sector control. Node 7 automatically mirrored it to Deepwatch Aurum 9 under the Kessara handoff protocol. I did not know the handoff protocol existed until after the event. And Earth responded, he said. Earth responded in 9 minutes, I said. There was a pause. One of the Admiral's staff officers, a commander whose name I did not catch, asked a follow-up question. Had I confirmed the identity of the Deepwatch vessels through official Terran registry channels? I told her I had confirmed against the Deepwatch Grid's own communications headers, which were authenticated under the Interoperability Memorandum's Clause 6, which established a mutual cryptographic verification protocol. She was quiet for a moment after that. I got the impression she had not known Clause 6 existed, which was not surprising, and that she was now adding it to a mental list that was growing longer than she had expected when she woke up that morning. Thesson came back on the channel. Walk me through the departure, he said. When did they leave, and what was the Vethamara's status at that point? I walked him through it. The Constance undocked at 1 hour before the fleet's arrival. The holdfast hull work was complete 90 minutes before that. The Meridian had been on station the entire time. At the moment the Deepwatch formation departed, the Vethamara had stable life support, a hull patch rated for standard jump transit, 17 recovering patients in the medical bay, 4 of whom had been critical and were now stable, and a drive section that was returning to approximately 60% capacity on the work of 1 engineer and her team. They were already gone when we arrived, he said. This was not a question. He had seen the scope. 3 contacts approaching, no contacts present. The Deepwatch formation had been 3 minutes outside his sensor range when his fleet crossed into mine. They departed approximately 1 hour before your arrival, I said. The Vethamara's hull patch is rated for transit. Sira Ondath's medical report is in the package I sent you. The 4 critical cases are all stable. 2 are cleared for normal care. The structural assessment and recommended repair routing are also in the package. He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that is doing something, working through a set of facts that have arrived in a sequence you did not anticipate, in an order that makes their implications difficult to absorb one at a time. And the Vethmara's crew, he said, all 212. All 212 are alive, I said. 17 who were in serious condition have been treated and stabilized. The fourth critical case came through surgery successfully. They are aboard their vessel and her life support is operating at full capacity. The hull patch will hold for transit. Another pause, longer. The fleet was supposed to be here, he said. This was not directed at me. It was the kind of statement that a person makes when they are working through something quietly and the channel happens to be open. The fuel depot incident delayed the initial response, I said carefully, and the routing error meant the early notification did not reach sector control. Under normal circumstances, he said, we would have been 6 hours too late. I did not answer that. He did not seem to expect me to. The Foreign Affairs Protocol officer arrived 8 hours after the fleet. His name was Subdirector Vethmoran, and he had clearly been briefed extensively on the transit because his first question, before he had even sat down in the briefing room, was whether I had a complete copy of the interoperability memorandum. I handed him one. I had printed 17 copies, and they had been sitting on the edge of my desk for most of the day. He read it, not the summary, the whole document. He sat across from me in the briefing room and read 46 pages of legacy infrastructure clauses while I sat there and answered the occasional question. And at the end of it, he put the document down and looked at the ceiling for a while. Clause 14, he said. I had read Clause 14. I had not mentioned it to Commander Retvasa yet because I had been waiting until the immediate crisis was resolved before introducing new information. Yes, I said. That's a joint operational planning provision. Yes. For the Kessara corridor specifically. For the Kessara corridor and all adjacent sectors within 6 light towers, I said. It was intended to cover the full range of the original Deepwatch relay network, which, according to the technical appendix, included 3 additional listening posts beyond Orem 9, which are presumably still operational. I have no information about their current status, I said, but given that Orem 9 responded in 9 minutes, I would not assume the others are dormant. Vethmoran looked at the document again. He was quiet for a while. This was signed 230 years ago, he said. Yes. We forgot about it. Apparently. They did not. Apparently not. He looked at me. How long have you been at this posting? 9 years. And you had no idea this existed? No. Neither did anyone else at this station. No. But Earth knew. He looked at the document again. Earth dispatched 3 ships in 9 minutes. They had a repair vessel ready. They had a trauma suite. He tapped Clause 12 with one finger. They were ready for this. They appear to have been ready for this, I said. He sat with that for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, how many other agreements do we have with them? This was not a question I could answer. This was a question for the Legacy Treaty Instruments Committee, which was apparently already convened, and for the Foreign Affairs Review Board, which Vethmoran told me had been assembled that morning, and for a set of archivists and analysts who were, at this very moment, going through records that had not been reviewed in decades to find out exactly how many documents existed that looked like this one. But I thought about the committee that existed for situations like this, the one that met rarely, the one that had convened on an emergency basis this morning. Someone at some point had known this was a possibility, had built the apparatus to handle it, had maintained the apparatus even when the underlying agreement faded from institutional memory. Earth had dispatched 3 ships in 9 minutes. I don't know, I said, but I think the answer is probably more than we know. I filed the incident report that evening. It took me 4 hours, because incident reports of this category require extensive documentation, and because I wanted to be precise. I included the full chronology, the relay node decommission notice, the handoff protocol, the interoperability memorandum with all 17 clauses, the deepwatch response timeline, the holdfast structural assessment, the Constance's medical report, and the communications logs from every channel I had been working across the course of the day. In the notes field, which is technically optional and is generally used for brief operational observations, I wrote 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph summarized the routing error and its cause, the decommission notice, the handoff protocol, the automated mirror to ORM 9 in plain language, without technical qualification, in the hope that a future watch officer reading this report would understand immediately what had happened and why. The second paragraph summarized the response timeline, beginning with Earth's 9-minute dispatch and ending with the Sovereignty Fleet's arrival 59 minutes after the Deepwatch vessels departed. The third paragraph contained a single recommendation, that all station personnel responsible for network infrastructure be required to read the full decommission handoff protocol for any node under their jurisdiction, not merely the summary, and that the interoperability memorandum and its 17 clauses be included in the standard onboarding documentation for all Kessara watch officers. The fourth paragraph was shorter. It read, "The crew of the Vethamara are alive because an automated system did exactly what it was designed to do, and because Earth's Deepwatch responded to that automated trigger with resources and speed that suggest they have been maintaining readiness for this contingency for 230 years. We did not know they were there. They were there anyway. This station's personnel should be aware of that fact, and should file the relevant documentation in an accessible location, and should not wait until the next emergency to read it." I added one more line, which was not standard incident report language, but which seemed important enough to put on the record. The handoff protocol for Node 7 was filed 11 months ago. The interoperability memorandum has been in the station archive for at least 9 years, which is the length of my posting. I did not read it. I do not know if my predecessors read it. I am recommending that the relevant clauses be distributed to all watch officers as standing awareness material, not because the document is complicated. It is not, but because the agreements we have signed are only as useful as our knowledge that they exist. Earth knew about Clause 12. Earth was ready. We were not. That is a correctable condition, and I am recommending that we correct it. I submitted the report and marked the incident closed. Then I sat at my station for a while in the quiet of the watch floor, with the Vethamara's icon on the scope, stable, holding position, waiting for the tug that would take her to the repair yard, and thought about maintenance cycles and ticket numbers and work orders that nobody had read in 11 months. There is a thing that experienced watch officers say about the Kessara corridor, a piece of old operational wisdom that gets passed down from one posting to the next, that this sector is quieter than it looks, and that the debris field is more navigable than the charts suggest, and that the relay network, old as it is reliable. I had always taken the last part of that wisdom to mean that our network was reliable. Our nodes, our uplinks, our protocols. I think now that the people who first said it probably meant something more than that. I think they meant all of it. Every node, every uplink, every protocol, every 200-year-old agreement in the filing system, every listening post at 4 light hours distance, every repair ship with a ready crew, every trauma suite that can be deployed in 9 minutes. I did not know about any of that when I filed the decommission notice for Node 7. I know about it now. 59 minutes. That is the gap between what we had and what we needed on the morning the Vethamara went dark in the debris field. 59 minutes between the Deepwatch vessels leaving and the Sovereignty fleet arriving. 59 minutes in which everything that needed to be done had already been done, by 3 ships that answered a call nobody meant to send them, under a clause nobody had read, because somebody, 230 years ago, had made a commitment and kept it, and because somebody, every year since then, had kept the listening posts running and the repair cradles loaded and the trauma suites stocked. We did not know they were there. They were there anyway. Both of those things are true, and I am not sure, sitting here in the quiet of the watch floor with the duty log open and the Veth Amara's icon steady on the scope, which one of them is more remarkable.